All right, good morning, everybody. I hope that you and yours are doing well. I want to thank you for participating in EDR from AFAR. Wanted to kick off this morning with some information that we would have shared with you when we were together at EDR, and you've seen it by now if you've had a chance to read your annual report that we sent out. But we've been super blessed. Our system has been super blessed with the success that we've had in partnership with you and our communities. In the last 6 years, the electric cooperatives have played a key role in the attraction and expansion of companies investing in more than $6.4 billion and creating 30,000 jobs. The announced capital investment and job creation resulted in nearly $30 billion of economic impact to our state. These results include a state and local tax impact of almost $785 million and labor income of more than $6.7 billion. That for us, and that's a quote from our chairman who's on the call, but that is unprecedented for our system. And so we just want to start by saying thank you to each of you for what you do. Just here's another look at it. So today is a little bit of a fireside chat with the topic of why site readiness matters, and especially now, given what we are all going through and the impact to the economy. If you remember, if you were with us last week, Pete Mento talked about a couple of things. One is that we're going to come out of this and the economy is going to pick back up as quickly as it stopped. The other thing that he mentioned was the fact that companies are going to have to really reassess their logistics and ensuring that they can have access to product and materials and supplies when they need it. So the discussions about reshoring has all ramped up again, almost to hyperspeed. So our board made a commitment to preparedness in 2014, and they put their money where their mouth is. We have invested millions in site development and partnered with communities and cooperatives across the state, the Department of Commerce, and getting sites ready and making sure that we are market ready, not just certifying a site, not just buying a piece of property and sitting on it. It's actually getting product ready and deliverable. And so that's what we want to talk about today. And we've got some great panelists with us. You'll see them on your screen there. Mark Williams is founder of Strategic Development Group. They specialize in site selection and incentive negotiation for mid to large US and multinational manufacturers. If you've seen a Bridgestone deal anywhere in the US, Mark has touched it. Mark has probably led it. Before this, he was a chief development officer at Department of Commerce. And we've gotten to know Mark over the last several years, not just from the site selection side, but also Mark and his partner, Jeanette Goldsmith, do the third-party review for all of our site readiness funded requests that we take to our board to make sure that, look, if we put money in this deal, can we actually get a deal done? And they've been great partners for us. Mark is passionate about life at home with his wife, Sue, on Lake Murray. He loves his grandbabies. He loves cooking. He loves gardening. He sent a pic the other night of his dinner, which is one of the things that we do. We share our dinner pictures of what we cook, but he actually grew the broccoli in his garden, which I didn't know you could actually do that. And then from his farm to his table, it was pretty cool. Next is Keith Avery. Keith is CEO of Newberry Electric Cooperative. He serves on the Central Board of Trustees. He serves on our board of directors for the South Carolina Power Team. He also serves on the board of Carolina Connect. Carolina Connect is the broadband initiative of Mid-Carolina Electric Cooperative and Newberry Electric Cooperative, where we're deploying high-speed fiber, high-speed fiber to our members in their homes and business. And it has been wildly successful. He is married to his bride, Mary. His daughter, Kelsey, who is supposed to be on this call, and hopefully texting her dad notes about what to say. But she's not fallen far from the economic development tree. She was our former intern. She was at Department of Commerce, and now she's in Aiken, serving with their regional alliance. He's also passionate about his life on Lake Murray. He also lives on Lake Murray. And you will find few people in the cooperative world that are as passionate about economic development as Keith. He's just been an amazing advocate for Newberry, and an amazing advocate for the power team and the cooperative commitment to growth in our state. So Keith, thank you for being with us. And then finally, Jamie Frost. I'm resisting a very big opportunity to roast Jamie, but instead I will give him a proper introduction. So Jamie's our Senior Vice President of Community Preparedness. Jamie was a partner at Alliance Consulting Engineers, and has just vast experience in site development, any sort of civil engineering type issues. He's been a great consultant for the communities that we serve and for the cooperatives that we serve. He's also helped us take our site readiness game to the next level. We've gone from, in its infancy, taking sites and buying them and doing kind of low-hanging fruit stuff. And now we're focused on, and he'll talk to you about what we take to our board is fully developed parts, fully developed projects with all the commitments in place, helping bring all the partners to the table. So he's just been a tremendous asset to our team. Jamie's the father of four. He and his bride, Beth. Beth is also in our economic development world. She's a business development exec for one of the construction firms here in Columbia. He's also passionate about cooking. If it walks in the woods, flies in the woods, he'll hunt it and probably eat it. So that's our panel for today. I'm gonna go off screen and mute and then monitor what's going on behind the scenes here. So folks, if you have questions for the panelists, there's an opportunity for you to on your little handle, you can raise your hand and let me know that you have a question. You can also send me a question, or in chat, you can send a message as well, or you can text me if you've got my cell phone. So with that, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
So James, this is Mark. I think I'll kick some things off if that's okay. First, thanks, James and your team and Bob, your board, for doing this session. You guys adapted quickly. I saw the session with Pete, that went incredibly well. We're hopeful this one went too. My new nickname for James is the convener, because he brings people together to talk about really powerful economic development things. So thanks for being here. I just wanted to give a couple of introductory thoughts about site selection and site readiness, because it's been an interesting journey both in South Carolina and around the country. I mean, the premise of site readiness has to do with site selection when you have the process is kind of like a funnel. You start with lots of sites at the top, and your goal is to very quickly narrow to the bottom where you have one or two finalist sites. And what states and communities and utilities found, which actually began in New York in 1998, this process of various forums, it's over 20 years old. These entities began to feel like, no product, no readiness, no clients. And so this really took shape, and it's evolved into a lot of things nationally. I mean, there are about 36 states right now that have some form of site readiness, which is defined very broadly. I mean, it can be site certification, it can be a pad ready site, document ready, investment ready. It's a myriad of things where communities and states and utilities are trying to put better product in front of site selectors like us or companies that are doing their own searches. But what's really unique about what the power team has done in the last years, as James has discussed, is there's a really unique formula that's very efficient and very focused on not just going through the process of filling out forms and saying your site ready. It's really doing the due diligence and really pushing product to market that's ready, and then where there are deficiencies, funding them in a very efficient way to ensure readiness. So the Power Team's site readiness program is, I find, different than any other in the country. It's more thorough, and it's backed by funding to fill some gaps. So why does all this matter now? Well, right around February 19th, we had just finished an 127 months economic growth run, longest in history, longer in 10 years. Fast forward 60 days later to a couple days ago, we had a problem, right? We had a 60-day problem. We had a virus. Business is pretty challenged. Supply chains are challenged. There are lots of things going on. So what does that mean in those two steps? Well, the first step is after 127 months of recovery, in most places, states and communities are starved for sites because locations had occurred on them. South Carolina had been very successful in that period. And so again, it was very important that the Power Team in particular continue to fill that pipeline with qualified sites that would work because business was good. What does it mean now with the virus? We'll probably talk more about it, but what it means to me is we get through this virus, we get through a presidential election, we figure out whatever reshoring and supply chain issues there are, but my expectation is next year, this site readiness process is going to really continue to generate great benefits. So I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, appreciate your opening remarks. Thank you again for being on our panel here. We appreciate you taking your time. Again, I'm Jamie Frost, Senior Vice President of Community Preparedness with the South Carolina Power Team. Honored to be with y'all this morning, and appreciate everybody listening in and viewing in. Thanks for being a part of this. Since we could not be here in person, but Mark, one of my thoughts or one of my questions for you is, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Strategic Development Group, your practice, your site selection practice, and what types of projects are you seeing right now? You mentioned a little bit about COVID, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress. But tell me a little bit, about your practice and kind of where you're working, what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, so Jamie, our practice is probably 80% site selection and 20% related to site identification and site readiness. It's work we really love. James mentioned that Jeanette was on our team. She's kind of the mother of certain site readiness programs. She's been involved in this for pretty much the full 20 years. So we do a lot of site selection, a lot of manufacturing, some headquarters. We're heavy in the automotive, chemical, steel, and kind of general manufacturing. I guess overall, most of the work we do is in South Carolina, but I have to say we worked in 35 states last year. We'll probably work in about the same number this year. So we're not only working here, but we're working in the Southeast, the Gulf Coast, and the West Coast. So that's what Strategic Development Group does. If I could comment, Jamie, on one thing I think you were leading to is it's interesting to me how the virus scenario is affecting our client decisions and the projects that we're actively involved in now. And it's kind of a tale of 2 or 3 different worlds, but we have clients that are full speed ahead. Full speed ahead. We are negotiating rail rates, electricity rates, land taxes on the West Coast right now. I got to tell you, it's not easy this way, but we do the best we can. So some of those projects are full out. Some have furloughed employees and are somewhat shut down and slowed down, and some have just stopped. So there's a lot of momentum. I think those companies that have the foresight and the wherewithal, they think this is an interim step, and why not do your site selection in the interim step and be ready when everything heats back up? So there are everything is not shut down. In many respects, we're still very busy.
Great, great.
Jamie, talk more about you. I mean, James's introduction was very good, and I'm going to say a little about you before you say about you, but I really think it's pretty powerful, the extent of your engineering background and experience in the role you're in. So I don't want to steal any more of that thunder, but I've never seen that level of expertise on a team like this anywhere in the country. But talk more about you, and then let's talk a little about how you perceive this program.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think y'all are being probably overly kind about my experience level, but, you know, I am a civil engineer. You know, I practiced engineering for over 20 years, graduated from the University of South Carolina in 1997 and jumped right into really site development. Did a little bit of environmental landfill type development, but then quickly moved into commercial, institutional, and ultimately for the last 15 years or so, been working primarily on industrial development and industrial site development, planning, engineering, permitting, you name it. And so, I feel like that's afforded me some pretty great opportunities. And now in the position that I'm in with the South Carolina Power Team, I enjoy being able to assist communities that I worked in for many, many years, just kind of on the different side of the table. Now I can kind of help them from a consultant mindset, but lead them down a path that I believe can truly help them prepare for industrial development and get ready. So I think as I look at site readiness and what does it truly mean to be site ready, there's some common denominators of the sites that have seen wins. I mean, I do think you have those one-offs or two-offs that, were so location driven that, maybe the site being ready didn't really matter to the decision process. It was, a logistical play or, a labor play, or, the prospect just said, I need to be right here. This is where three interstates come together. Boom, that's where I need to be. I'll do what it takes to get the site ready. But in most cases, I think there's some things that are truly common denominators. And one of the things that I truly try to focus on when I think about site readiness is I really try to put myself in a site selector's shoes or a prospect shoes. And I look at the site that I'm analyzing in the sense of, are there risks? Can I take those risks off the table? Can I put myself in a position, if I was that investor, or if I was that prospect, or if I was that consultant, can I truly look at this site and say, I know I have all the information in front of me that tells me there are no risks associated with what I consider site development. I know my water's there. I know my wastewater's there. I know that either if it's clear grubbed and graded, maybe not, but I know there's a permit easily in place that I can be clear grubbed and graded. And so if I feel like I can answer all of those questions, even down to zoning and, all of those, and the one question left is, essentially as an industry, can I do business here? Then I think that's ready. And I think, those common denominators are truly, are the risks eliminated? Are we saving time for a prospect or an investor? Are we saving money? Site development costs money. It takes time. We can take those off the table, and that's a huge benefit. And then lastly, Mark, I mean, I would say, and, quite frankly, and I wouldn't say a light bulb went off in my head, but you mentioned this the other day as we were just chatting, but, you know, really offering some sort of vision, being able to create a vision. As I was practicing engineering and working on multiple sites throughout the state, you know, we would certify sites, we would do, you know, site conceptual plans, preliminary cost opinions, and all of that's great. I mean, that's a form of site investment and site advancement, but are you creating a vision other than a two-dimensional plan on a piece of paper that you can put in front of a prospect? They can kind of see that, but in a lot of cases, if they don't have an engineering mindset, they might not understand, hey, okay, I can see my building going here. And oftentimes we'd take them out in the field and we'd be sitting on the road looking at a fully, you know, forested piece of property that nobody could tell what the topo looked like. So the more we can do to ready a site, clear, grub, and grade it, pad it out, build a building, have the infrastructure there, it creates that vision. The prospect comes, they can truly see, look across the field and say, I can see my plant. I can see.
You know, I don't think you can emphasize enough that concept of vision, because we've all been in this business a long time. We have technical backgrounds. Everybody watching our session now is in economic development. We speak the language, we understand the language, but the fact of the matter is clients come in all kinds of shapes, sizes, and backgrounds. And one thing I've noticed over the years is they don't perceive things necessarily the way they're presented to them. And anything you can do to create and enhance that vision of what could be is just critically important. Let me ask you one other thing, James, Jamie, that I've been curious about, and it's kind of from a strategic perspective, from inside the power team. What does this program mean to them? Why so much emphasis? Talk about that for just a second.
Well, you know, I think, you know, a lot of it stems to the cooperative principles. You know, James quoted our chairman, Mr. Bob Pauling, chair of the board of the South Carolina Power Team, and then a lot of that quote talked about, you know, investment and what that's meant to the state. But one of the key principles to the cooperatives is the concern for their members and the concern for their community. You know, and I think economic development plays such a role in that. You know, without economic development, you know, it's hard to grow your community. So when you relate economic development back to a quality of life and being able to essentially, you know, create an avenue to offer investment from prospects and site consultants, I think it all just leads back to the cooperative's principle of wanting to see their members, wanting to provide that quality of life to their members. So essentially, they've decided to invest in sites within their service territories to really drive economic development to their members. And we're seeing some really major impacts, as James quoted Mr. Pauling earlier. And, you know, I'll chat a little bit about as we kind of get further into our discussion. But, you know, Keith, we hadn't heard from you yet. Certainly, again, appreciate you being on the panel with us. We think you offer, you know, from the cooperative standpoint, some valuable insight as to why the cooperatives are doing what they're doing. But before we get there, would love to hear a little bit about, you know, yourself, your role at the cooperative. Certainly you sit on the South Carolina Power Team's Board of Trustees and appreciate your leadership there. But tell us a little bit about your role at Newberry Electric Cooperative, maybe what y'all are doing for economic development and how that plays into some of those cooperative principles again.
Sure. I'll tell you, economic development to Newberry is critical for us, because if we look at our service territory, we can kind of break it up into thirds. A third of our territory is going to be like national forest. Nothing's going to happen there. And then we have a third of our territory that is agricultural. So the only thing that we really saw from a residential growth perspective was down around Lake Murray, which is only going to be so much of that. So economic development is critical for us from a growth standpoint, to be able to, as a company, to continue to grow and provide for our members. What our role that I kind of see is kind of threefold. I kind of jokingly tell people I do whatever Rick Farmer tells me, our local economic development person, him and Kara. But really, our job is really to work with the economic developers to help them be successful, and to kind of take it, a step farther is education of our officials, elected officials, and work with county council. Sometimes county council is, depending on the council itself, can be challenging itself. And so we try to educate them along with some of the other elected officials that we've got. And as we go and we look at it from a growth, it is best for us to see it to be, what's the economic development say? You got to have the product out there. You can't wait to have the product. You got to have the product waiting for them to be there. And we've seen that on and on and on. So it's been good. So we work very closely with the local folks on that. Absolutely. And in addition to that, our funding is critical for the counties as well, because you got some that really can't do a whole lot of funding on it. So we take it upon ourselves, and my board is very progressive, and I really appreciate our board stepping up, but we also do a lot with the funding on it.
Hey, Jamie and Keith, this might be a good time to show a couple of examples of what site readiness, what market ready looks like. And we got an example from Mid-Carolina specifically, if you want to. If I can get this thing to advance.
Yeah.
Not Mid-Carolina.
No,
Yeah.
this is Tri-County.
Yeah.
This is Tri-County Global. And Keith, just to kind of dovetail on one of the things you mentioned, as it relates to education, education and workforce are such a huge component of being ready. It's not always just site readiness. Certainly you got to have the sites, you got to have the product to drive, prospect activity. But, another key component is truly that community development role. And, that's another role that the cooperatives are playing a huge part of. We recently hired a community development director, Caroline Warner. She will be kicking off this year with a lot of new programs and initiatives to jump in and try to get involved in the communities that our cooperatives serve, to try to assist in that community development role. But kind of getting back to the site readiness component is, what does it really mean to be site ready? This is an example of Tri-County Electric Cooperative invested, now I would say they've invested pretty close to $10 million on the site. It's a little less than 400 acres. It's on interstate frontage along 601 and I-26 in Orangeburg County. And for this particular site, the cooperative helped purchase the site, clear grubbed and graded a 45-acre pad that aligns well with Norfolk Southern's mainline rail. And currently, you can't see it very well in the picture, but if you look down pretty close to the frontage road adjacent to the interstate, you'll see what kind of looks like a green line in there. That's sewer pipe that's being installed right now, a force main to serve up to 500,000 gallons a day of water and wastewater to this site. So again, I mentioned it's taking the risks and taking the time off the table. So far for this particular project, it's been 2 years in the making. A prospect can't wait that long to be ready. They want to select a site, build their building, which may take, a year to 18 months, but they can't wait 2 years for the rest of the stuff to happen. They can't have a building sitting out there and still have another 6 months of water and sewer installation. So it just doesn't work. So great example of what we kind of see as being site ready. And this is really the premise of what we are taking to the South Carolina Power Team Board of Trustees for review and approval in the way of site readiness fund requests is, you know, it's not just buying land. It's buying land and making sure it's ready. Taking those risks, saving time and saving money for the prospect and creating that vision. This is the Connexial Park in Lawrence. Again, this was about originally about an $8 million investment. It's quickly increased to over $10 million investment now. It's about 400 acres in size. And essentially it was clear, grub and grade, a pad, getting roadway water, wastewater into the site. And now you can see the signs of a speculative building going up in this park, 150,000 square foot spec building. That's already being submitted on projects, multiple projects, and already starting to get very, very good traction and a lot of activity. You know, and then I guess I'll dovetail into, again, maybe Keith, another question for you is how is the site readiness, at least that initiative, you know, how is it benefiting your members? And, you know, this is Mid-Carolina Commerce Park. I think if anybody's familiar with the Commerce Park, it's been around now for, you know, 10 years or so. When the land was first purchased, you know, phase 1 roadway water and wastewater was built into the site. Ultimately, a spec building was there. And then, you know, now you see 4 buildings out there. So just a huge testament to site readiness. One of the last things that the South Carolina Power Team did on this site was help find a clear grub and graded pad. And if you see the farthest building over to the left, where James is circling his cursor around, that's about an 18-acre building pad that now has Technics landed on it. So that's one of the wins that we've seen through our site readiness program. But Keith, tell us how this program's, you know, benefited you from the cooperative standpoint and your members.
Well, you take anytime that you can recruit industry into your area, of course, that increases your kilowatt hour sales and increases your load, which helps keep your overall cost down. So the more that we can recruit from an industrial standpoint, the more it's going to help our residential members because it helps us control cost as we go forward. There's always a business reason to do anything on that. So when we look at economic development, and from our perspective, the more that we can bring in, since we're in a small, compact area where we're not going to have a tremendous amount of growth, we have to really control the growth that we have or what we can bring in. And for us, is the emphasis on industrial. But the bottom line is it helps us serve our members better. It increases their quality of life through jobs, good jobs. You know, we're not talking about just any jobs. These have to be good paying jobs to recruit these industries in. And it helps us keep our costs down, which in turn keeps their rates down. So that's the biggest reasons that we do that. And, you know, when you look at Mid-Carolina Commerce Park, that's kind of over there, Technics, that's kind of, we'll talk a little bit more about that hopefully in a little bit, but that was kind of the start of it. And when you look at the site readiness, I can tell you when I first came to Newberry and you rode out through there, you didn't see anything.
Right.
It was all woods. Yeah, you know, we had a road in there. You know, basically all it was really good for was for kids to be four-wheeling out through there or shoot a deer or two out off the back of it. Then we got the spec building in, and then we did the clear grubbing and the pad and that type stuff. And that's what started that entire process, was the site readiness to bring people in, with the first one coming in with Technics. So if all of that hadn't have been done and it just stayed a wooded industrial park with a road into it, I don't think we would have had the growth that we've seen so far. That was kind of catalyst that pushed us forward on that. And, you know, as I talk about that, and I talk about, it's kind of a good lead in for this, you know, we looking at with the engineers, with your background, you know, we have to certify the sites, we have to go out, we have to do the site readiness, and we have all these terms that we utilize. But I'm gonna go to the expert to kind of talk about this. Mark, can you talk a little bit about the difference between site certification and site readiness? And what is that difference? And elaborate on, mentioned earlier, you know, controlling sites. I think that's critical for us as we go forward. Can you talk a little bit about why the local leadership needs to focus on controlling that asset so that we can control what happens on a site?
Well, Keith, I hate to say this, but I'm a little confused about site certification and the difference between that and site readiness too, because if you look at the country, there are, you know, dozens and dozens of, say, site certification programs. There's gold, bronze, platinum, some here and many other places. So there are various levels of certification where different checklists have been done. Our firm's done site certification in many states. We don't do it anymore. One reason is a liability reason in terms of companies now want you to guarantee everything's there. They want you to sign a document saying it's done. So, but site certification has been kind of the checklist process. And if I could, related to your question, I want to compare it to the Power Team's site readiness program, because I think the Power Team's site readiness program, Jamie has other work he does where due diligence is being confirmed before we even see these projects in the site readiness program. So in essence, certification is occurring or mostly occurring there. And the difference in terms of site certification in that regard and site readiness for the Power Team, the Power Team is actually funding making a site virtually complete if the project warrants it. And so across the country, you're going to see sites that are certified, and I'm not speaking about South Carolina here, that will never be developed, that there's some fatal flaw there. So just because a site is certified doesn't mean it's site ready. But I really feel that through this effort, the sites are being made ready. One of your other questions, Keith, was control. And I wish we had a whole other session here, but one of the issues our clients are very afraid of is risk. And not controlling land, meaning it's not owned or optioned by someone they trust, like an economic development entity, is a very risky proposition for our clients. Because you know, we've seen letters of intent, and you know, in my 30 years, people die, people change their minds, other things happen. And so if a company's going to take the time to go through that funnel and narrow, they want to know that ultimately they can take that site. And that's the beauty of the control by the local entity. And that's typically where it goes and where it's most effective.
Excellent. I know with site readiness, I can see with Mid-Carolina Commerce Park, you know, the benefits that we've had from there. But can you give us another example of a high impact project that really made a huge difference on site readiness?
Yeah, I want to refer to kind of a suite of situations where there's high impact. You know, typically there's the funnel of the process, and you might have 6 or 9 months to do a site selection. But where site readiness really matters most, in my opinion, is for some reason the timetable has been severely compressed. So we've seen projects that for whatever reason, it may be a site has already been selected and there's a fatal flaw that's been found in that site, or there's a weather event that affected that site. But for whatever reason, a company thought they had 9 months to make a decision. They spent 6 months making that decision, and then they found out with 3 months left, oh, by the way, we need to have a site to start our project because our customer is still depending on our output per the schedule we dictated originally. So what I want to say is site readiness in those cases where companies are in a hurry for some reason And it doesn't matter if it's a $20 million project, which we've done, or a $500 million project. So if the site readiness has been done, they see the zoning's right, they see all the infrastructure's right, they see the risk has been wrung out of the situation. That's a good situation for that.
How many times have we seen people lose projects because they didn't have anything ready for them? It's just amazing.
And I think if we do the overlay of I really think reshoring had started in this country, in the Southeast and in South Carolina, and I really think it's going to accelerate. And if you're going to move your plant from overseas back to the US, you're going to want to do it in a hurry. If you've made up your mind, you're going to want to do it in a hurry. So that's another case of compressed time, needing to make a decision, needing to wring the risk out of that decision. So site readiness gets more valuable every day. That's what we get.
Mark, if I can chime in, this is James. We saw that with Samsung, and even though Samsung wasn't a site readiness funded project, we had an available building.
Right.
With Caterpillar announcing they were going to vacate Newberry and shutter that facility, the number one reason, it wasn't incentives. People think so much about how important incentives are, and they are, but they're not the driver. The driver was having an available building where they could get into the market. That deal closed in July, and by January of that next year, so 6 months, they were moving product out the door. That decision took 3 or 4 months of negotiation, but that is the fastest in 25 years for me that I've ever seen a deal get done and actually see product moving out the door. That is the kind of stuff I think we're going to see in the years ahead, days and years ahead, is these things are going to move quick. They're sitting on capital. They have to meet a market. That was Samsung's situation. They needed to be first to the market. They needed to be LG into North America, and that's what they did. I think we're going to see more of that.
Agree entirely.
And we got a couple of questions. You guys, can we jump into the fire here and let some folks ask some questions?
Sure.
Marty Balzinger.
Hey. Now, James, thanks for doing the EDR from AFAR series. This is good. And Mark, I was just going back when you talked about the companies that are full speed ahead, and just how are they handling, site visits with the COVID-19 travel restrictions? Again, we certainly know there's drone, virtual tour type stuff. Is that enough? And I guess my last comment is I've never, I guess what I learned was I've never seen a company select the site without visiting it. So.
Yeah, and you know what? We never recommend a short list of sites to our clients unless we've seen it before they see it. So not being able to travel is an issue. It's probably our biggest issue right now, Marty. And I guess our thinking on this now is we've kind of pushed the desktop review into a site visit. So in a number of projects we're working on, we're attempting to do more in this kind of media. We're asking communities, states, utilities to beef up what they can show us virtually, to try to get us a little further down the funnel before we go. But we're going to have to go. And we have a large deal out west right now, and my client called yesterday and said, we've got to get out there. And there's a discussion of going in 2 weeks. And does that occur? I don't know. But the process that our firm, and I think a number of our competitors have entered, is trying to squeeze more out of this virtual process, but it's not going to take us all the way, or some dangerous decisions are going to be made, because you can't learn everything there is to learn from data, and you can't learn everything there is from a Google Earth picture or a drone. You get on a site, you feel things, you see things, you sense things. As you know, if you've seen 1,500 sites or 2,000 sites, you have that sense, and you generally, you're really going to get it when you're there.
Thank you.
All right, Chuck Whipple.
There's Chuck.
Chuck, you're off mute.
Showing up that he's still on mute on mine.
He's on mute.
Yeah,
Picture looks great.
there you go.
There he is.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yes, sir.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. Mark, in your estimation, what impact will COVID-19 have on foreign direct site selection activity for the remainder of 2020 and going into 21?
I don't know about 2020 because we're well into it, but late 2020, 2021, Chuck, I think the reshoring concept was starting, as I mentioned a minute ago, and I think COVID-19 has exposed a number of supply chain issues, in particular for some industries. Industries that depend on just-in-time, automotive, the pharmaceutical industry has certainly learned a lot in this process. There are some defense components that are being made offshore. So I think COVID-19 may have accelerated notice that supply chain was at risk. I mean, what I've seen over the years is there's this pendulum that swings where companies want to locate based on economics. But when you locate on economics, sometimes that creates a greater risk because you've got too many eggs in one basket. And then there's an event like COVID-19 or rising wage rates in China, whatever it is, and then that pendulum's going to swing back a little bit. And so I think we're going to see more activity in the US because of this. I think especially for products that are being sold in the US and North America, there's going to be a lot of thinking about bringing the components back here.
You mentioned three. You mentioned automotive, pharmaceutical, and defense. Are there others that we need to be thinking about in terms of trying to target from a reshore perspective?
Gee, Chuck, you're always making me think harder and harder. Same
I
old.
apologize, Mark. I thought I muted him again. I forgot.
Yeah.
I'll be more careful next time.
We got to be better coordinated next
I'm
time.
sorry. There's a lot going on back here.
You know, not to specific industries right now, Chuck, but I am thinking about it, and let me offer this. I mean, any company that is selling primarily in the US or North America that's got a big offshore presence, to me is a target. So I would want to go through some trade data and sales data, and I think those entities are going to become evident. I think, you know, just for fun, here's some more. Healthcare products. I don't know a whole lot about face masks, but I'm guessing if they're products, maybe they're face masks, maybe they're not. But where the US in particular is at risk if there's another pandemic like this, because someone else is controlling our destiny because they manufacture these products we desperately need. My sense is that those companies may be moving back. They may be even pushed a bit to move back by our government. We'll see. So I think that's another case to be thinking about the hit list.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Good to
forgot
see
to
you.
mute him again. Bill McCall. Let me see if I can get down to Bill. All right, Bill, you should be able to talk. Ask
While
your
we're getting
question.
Bill McCall on, I guess, Mark, to kind of, you know, I guess piggyback off of your responses and maybe Chuck's question as it relates to, you know, the impact of COVID. I mean, one of the things that I think about a lot is, you know, certainly, you know, the thought of this reshoring, you know, but how is COVID impacting schedules for some of these decisions that, you know, I got to believe there were several industries, several prospects, several companies, you know, that had planned on making decisions in 2020 in an effort to maybe be operational in 2021 or 2022, wherever they decided to go. So one of the things that I really think a lot about is in the way of site readiness is, again, getting back to truly being ready with condensed schedules. I mean, I think so far in some cases, some of the international companies they probably saw the COVID before we did, obviously before it hit the United States. So, you know, they might be sitting in month 4 or so of this pandemic as it relates to if they were looking in the United States. And in some cases, I think it'll be 6 months before folks can really get back to traveling and really putting boots on the ground on site. So I think as it relates to, you know, how COVID may impact the decision is all of a sudden these condensed schedules means they're going to have to move quicker when they are able to get back to some of the site visits and community visits. And it's going to be the sites that are ready, in my eyes, that are going to see the wins.
You're on it. I mean, and talking to our competitors and our clients, I mean, anybody, there are a lot of projects that are going on hold. And if you're in a business and you don't need capacity for sure by sometime in 2021, you're going to say to yourself, you know, why don't we just see how this plays out a little bit? Why don't we take that time? And then if we assume it plays out well, our election is done, I think next year could be a pretty interesting year, but a lot of those decisions, as you say, are compressed.
Sure.
Bill McCall.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Hey, man, how are you?
Doing
Good.
good. I was speaking with an individual earlier this week from New York, and they're paying very close attention right now, are going to be in the future, because they're thinking a culture shift from this pandemic is going to be people leaving the cities, moving to more rural areas. You know, because especially the millennials today, they prefer living in the cities, but they think they're going to see people try to spread out more. And he says possible people leaving, you know, the north and coming to the south, particularly younger people, not just retirees. And having this product with site readiness, is there going to be a good opportunity there to take advantage of this possible new labor force moving into the state?
You know, if that happens, that's an injection of likely highly skilled people that would be very favorable to supplying business that are being recruited. Heck, we just built all that in-town housing for millennials. So gosh, I hope they use it. Yeah, I think with a lot of things though, Bill, I think we just got to see how things settle out. We just got to remain calm and see what happens. But if that does play out that way, that could be a real asset to South Carolina and the South. We need talented, skilled workers. We're working with our workforce now and doing it in a great way, but that kind of injection would be helpful if it indeed occurs.
Hey, Mark, I'm going to get you off script here a little bit. I recently had a conversation with a county council chairman about a large site in one of our counties. And they haven't purchased the site. Therefore, we cannot put our dollars into the site. The site has to be controlled by a public entity or a cooperative.
Right.
And their argument is that they're the most ready large site in our state. But I know intuitively that may be, but we're not the most ready site in the Southeast to win a project. Can you share some examples from other states where you've seen community partners make investments in some of their larger industrial sites or mega sites, and what that looks like compared to somebody who has a certified mega site who but doesn't own it and hasn't had no improvements to it?
Well, yeah, let me talk about some general examples, but I want to say, James, from a pure site selection perspective, if we're representing a client, that's going to be the control of that site and the risk related to not ultimately being able to take it down is going to be really high on the list. So unless we have to be there, really want to be there, if we have other alternatives that offer us the same labor, logistical, other advantages, this one gets scratched. You know, because control is very important. So other communities you know, it's really interesting. I mean, one I'm thinking of is Decatur, Alabama. I mean, Decatur, Alabama, 20, 25 years ago, they bought, you know, under thousands and thousands of acres along the I-65 and the Tennessee River and developed property there. And so they have steel mills, chemical plants, so on and so forth. So it was a really long-term, expensive, visionary. I've never seen anything quite like it, but if you Google Earth or fly over or drive in Decatur now, you'll see billions and billions of dollars of investment that wouldn't have been there without that kind of foresight, which a key component of that was control. So if you look at the automotive plant locations, it's very similar. There has to be a clear path to ownership. You know, sometimes people forget when we go down the funnel, I think, if our client's getting down to the top, you know, 2 or 3 sites, they're spending an awful lot of money on engineering and design. And they don't want to spend that money on a site that's going to fall out. And they're selling their board on it. And, you know, so there's capital in the form of cash. There's capital in the form of convincing their board. And they, you know, they do not want to risk having to switch gears. They do not want to risk the embarrassment that occurs. So on your original thought, I think that could be a real challenge with whatever site you're mentioning, because if there are other alternatives that meet the criteria and will work, but they're under control, they're going to get chosen, in my opinion.
So just to put minds at ease, I've scrolled the list of attendees and the local economic developers. The community I'm talking about is not here today. So if somebody's out there going, ooh,
Well, you can pass me a note later. How's that sound?
I can't. But it's so important. So important. What advice would you, and Keith, I know you work closely with the local elected officials there. So I'm a recovering local economic developer. I know one of my challenges throughout my career was convincing leaders to take that step to go ahead and take down property, take a calculated strategic risk to do it. What advice do you have for a local economic developer who's fighting that battle? How do they convince their leadership to take that step? Maybe Keith, you can start.
Wow. My first advice would be drink heavily, dealing with a county council and folks like that. Education's key to the folks. You've got to educate these people who have been elected into these positions who really don't know what they don't know. And a lot of times it takes somebody like an electric cooperative in the area or something like that to kind of sit down with these folks along with the economic developers to try to educate them and see, you know, let them understand that just like Mark said, you're going to miss out. If you can't control a property and take it down in a particular time frame, then you're going to lose that project. And we see it every single year, you know, as people come in. We've seen it here in Newberry for years because we didn't have any product. But it comes down, you have got to work with those elected officials. And basically, you're going to have to get involved with them and train them. You've got to build that relationship with them so that, you know, they trust what you're telling them. Most county councils are going to have a committee that you deal with the chairman of that committee or the chairman of the county council or whoever you're answering to. And we've got, of course, now I'll let Jamie talk this in just a minute, but as kind of piggyback off of this before we move on to the other topic, but we can help with that, with the education. And we've actually hired somebody to help us with the education on that. So if you don't educate them and they've got a certain mindset, you're not going to budge them. You're not gonna, just like the site that you just talked about, you're not going to budge those folks. I fought that battle when I first came to Newberry because they didn't think that economic development was their role. They had taken down a piece of property that actually cost 4 county councilmen their spots because of the backlash from it. They paid way too much for it. So it took a while to develop those relationships and to educate those folks to where if you're not growing, you're dying. That's a simple in business. That's what we say. If you're not growing, you're dying. So you've got to continue to be growing. So education has got to be a huge part of that. And we have somebody now on the power team, right, Jamie?
Yeah. As I mentioned before, I mean, we've hired Caroline Warner to be our director of community development, and she's doing a lot of research now, benchmarking our state and our communities against others throughout the United States, trying to determine, you know, are there success stories in other areas that we can learn from, and then, you know, as early as tomorrow, we'll be polling some of the what we consider economic development pros in the state, and asking some questions specifically of them as to, you know, what impacts could the South Carolina power team be making on community development, and how can we assist, be a convener, help with education and workforce development. I mean, those are two key components. But I think, you know, James, I mean, as you mentioned, you know, sites and not having control, again, it all stems back to, I think, you know, when a prospect's comparing one site versus the other, you know, you might have one site that isn't controlled in a state. You might have another site that is controlled in a state and is already owned by, you know, the county or the city or the public body. And they might be putting that on the table as an incentive, whereas here in South Carolina, it might still be an incentive, but the money has to go to purchase the site. And so it can't be used to help the company with maybe their building construction or, you know, some other component to the prospect itself. So it just, again, at the end of the day, not having that control is a critical flaw in most cases.
Part of that too, and I'll give you a good example while we own that. The Mid Carolina Commerce Park that you showed a while ago, that thing probably sit out there for 10 years. Nobody did anything with it. Okay, county didn't do it. They didn't even cut the timber off of it. You know, I'm like, at least cut the timber off of it and get some money back. Went in, did some site readiness work on it, and finally was able to talk the county into going into a spec building. You know, we worked with them, had a meeting here, brought a lot of people in, convinced the county that we needed something out there from a product standpoint because we were getting no looks, absolutely none. And it made it extremely hard on our economic developer at that time. And once we got that spec building, once we did some work out there at Mid Carolina Commerce Park, then we started getting looks. Then we started getting people coming in, and we were in the game when before we were not.
Hey, I've got a question from Haygood Morrison. I'm going to let him ask. Haygood, you should be able to unmute your phone.
Let's see if I can do this.
Yep, you're on. You're on.
Okay, yeah. So we've been focused thus far on sites being positioned for prospects. As a broker, we're often tasked with marketing former manufacturing plants and presenting the information and specifications on the plant so that it can be repurposed. There's usually reasons why they close down, and more often than not, the previous use is not a prospect for this for the plant. So, I mean, do you have any advice for how we can better interface with you and to improve the sales process of these plants?
Mark, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure. Hey, good. Hey there. How you doing? Hey, good. You know, the concept comes up often as to, hey, can we use an existing building or an existing site? And generally, if there's a greenfield option that has, you know, the perceived same, similar, or better attributes and assets, then clients generally lean that way, as I'm guessing you've seen, because it gets back to the former concept of risk. And what's the risk to us? What's the risk to us environmentally? What's the risk to us in terms of we don't really understand the level of rehab a building needs enhancement. And so I guess if I had any advice is how do you, we're going to use the word vision again, create the vision of significantly less risk, whether it's monetary, schedule, environmental. I think those are the critical elements that you've got, the risks that you've got to wring out of that process to, and I think that will help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey, good. Just to add to that, I think, and I think in most cases, brokers do a great job at this, but I think, in any case, I mean, if it's an existing building, again, it's all about taking the risks off the table, but having a building conditions assessment done on it, so that you can provide that to a prospect to show the roof is good, the mechanical's good, the plumbing's good, the electrical, whatever the case may be, or if it's not, typically those building conditions assessments will provide a cost to improve those. And then, lastly, I would say very similar to what we do for our site readiness piece through the South Carolina Power Team is we have Mark and Jeanette, a site selection consultant firm, review that site, and they give us the pros and cons, and they ultimately tell us what types of industry would be best suited for that site. And then that may give you a marketing tool to go do some, I guess I'd call it rifle approach marketing to specific sectors.
You can ask for the Power Team discount too. Hey, good.
Thank you. Good points. Thanks, y'all.
And I would say too is making sure that our team talks with your folks a lot, but making sure our team is educated about those opportunities as well as commerce project managers. There's a lot of times that if you're not top of mind, people may not remember. So anytime, and make sure that information, especially what Jamie was talking about, is in our database that we can collect that data.
Yeah, will do.
Okay. As we're going forward on this, Jamie, James talked in the beginning about the impact the electric cooperatives had on site readiness in the state of South Carolina in his remarks. From where you are and where you sit at the Power Team, what's the impact you seeing throughout the state with the Site Readiness Fund?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think it's been tremendous. For those of y'all that don't know about the Site Readiness Fund, and I guess I assume most of y'all probably do know about it. Some of y'all might not have, but it started in 2014 as a $30 million fund. It was to go 5 years, $6 million a year. Well, in 2018, our South Carolina Power Team Board of Trustees approved an additional $18 million, essentially $6 million to get us through 2019, 2020, and 2021. And so we've gone through 2019 and to date, just to throw out a few numbers that I think are pretty impactful. To date, the cooperatives have invested over $43 million or have approved up to $43 million on 31 different projects, 31 different site readiness funded grant opportunities. But one of the big things that I think is very impactful is that's leveraged a total of just over $205 million of construction improvements on 2 sites within cooperative served territories. And I think that just makes a huge difference in being ready. $43 million leveraging a total of $205 million is huge. And there's a multitude of partners in that. In some cases, the matching dollars to lead up to that total $205 million has come from cooperatives, it's come from the county. In a lot of cases, it's come from some of the South Carolina Department of Commerce grants, Rural Infrastructure Authority grants. So, it's brought so many players to the table that I believe is impactful. But something else that I think is truly impactful is out of the 31 grants that we've approved so far, we've had 12 announcements, or including 2 expansions on those. So, I mean, we're batting a little over 300%, you know, as it relates to number of grants versus number of wins we've seen. And I think if you think about some of the sites that you've seen today, just through this webinar with Tri-County Global, Mid-Carolina Commerce Park, the Connexial Center, I mean, these are sites that are really in the last few years are just coming out of the ground, and they still have a lot of growth potential. So I think you'll see a lot land there, but you know, those 12 announcements have led to 4,880 jobs and over 1.3, almost $1.4 billion in capital investment. I mean, I think that is truly showing impact and really making a difference in the communities the cooperatives serve.
I know as a board member at the power team, getting to see all of the projects come in, not just the ones, you know, we're dealing with, but seeing them statewide, you know, with the 46 counties, and kind of going forward from a board perspective, we see the benefits of the Site Readiness Fund. We see how it's helping other counties grow, and we see, you know, the total impact that it has on the state. And I can tell you from a board perspective, we are fully behind, and this is more for the folks that are out there listening. We're 100% behind this initiative for the Site Readiness Fund, and we see the impact of it daily, or well, not daily, but monthly as we go through it. But you know, I can't say enough about how much the board of the power team is behind this Site Readiness Fund. So it's going to be there for a while, and I would encourage folks, you know, if you're looking to growth, and if you don't have that property, then you really seriously need to look at taking down some property and getting it, and we can help with that. So
I've worked in 2 other states, and nowhere as a local economic developer did I have cooperative or EMC support like I've had, like we have had, and like you have had economic developers in South Carolina. And what's amazing about how the cooperatives here work is that if you know, Ray Farley's got a site readiness project in his backyard, all 20 cooperatives are investing in that. It's not politically correct. We're going where we can get a deal done. We're going where we have a willing partner, and the benefit is returned to the 20s. So when we are bringing new load to our system and we're creating jobs and opportunity, there's a ripple effect that goes back to the entire system and the entire 20 benefit. I don't know of any place else in the country right now that works the way the cooperatives here work. It's a very unique situation. And you look at our success with you as communities and in the state, it's because of the commitment the 20 have made to foster growth purposely in their backyard.
Yeah.
I was going to say, they mentioned, Jamie and Keith mentioned that we've hired somebody to do these visits. And I know I'm back on camera and people are going to start again making fun of my shirt, but that's okay. Jamie was supposed to take off his jacket before we started this presentation, and apparently he forgot. It'll be in his review. But, you know, one of the challenges I had, and I know one of the challenges that local EDOs and regional folks have is convincing local leaders to take that step. I would encourage you to do benchmark visits. Go visit other communities that have taken their community to the place you want to go. If it's in state, great. If it's out of state, great. But I know that for me and my work history, getting my elected officials to hear it from somebody else, to see for their firsthand what other communities have done to make these type of investments, played a huge role in the steps that we took. So I'm trying to ignore the banter here on chat. The other thing I would encourage you to do is bring a Mark Williams to your community. Dee Caldwell, these are assets in our backyard, in our communities, in our South Carolina state that are willing to help you and your communities. If they've got a fee, talk to us about it. We'll probably help you participate in that. but getting that third party expert's perspective on why it's so important, I think, is really invaluable to communities. Yes, this is a Peter Mylar shirt. Thanks, Alex. All right. So, gentlemen, you guys got some final comments you want to close with?
One of the things, James, I think, I mean, we've heard a lot about our site readiness fund and, how it's different than others. But I mean, I think that readiness led so much to really Samsung announcing. And while we have Keith sitting on a panel here, I mean, I think what a great opportunity for Keith to share that Samsung story to the rest of the group. If they have not heard it, I mean, it's just an awesome story. So Keith, I'd love to hear, you give us a little bit of your experience with Samsung and how site readiness really played a role in that.
Oh, sure. I wasn't gray-headed before Samsung. I'll tell y'all that, but that was a very interesting experience. I mean, you're talking about a major global company coming into, little Newberry County and Newberry Electric Cooperative. But the catalyst for that was, of course, with Caterpillar closing down. Now, Caterpillar had about 300 to 325 employees, and we thought that was going to be, terrible until Samsung come in. So we had numerous meetings, and these were quick meetings. Like James said earlier, I mean, within 6 months, we had a deal with Samsung. But there were a lot of moving parts to that. We had the Caterpillar building available. There was a question earlier, about with the building itself. They had to do some things to that building, but for them, it was not a deal breaker. What would have been a deal breaker for Samsung is they like to have, lack of a better word, a compound where they have everything set up. Just they like to do things, all over the world, just like they do in Seoul, Korea, and they have everything right there in Seoul, and they wanted everything in one spot. So we had the Caterpillar building, but they wanted the SWM building. It was right there. If you look at the map, you can kind of see that's kind of the before, right? That Mawson's Way. You had a little, SWM right there. Now, SWM is a Swedish company, and they make cigarette paper that they send overseas. But when they came in, they said, all right, we like the Caterpillar building, but we also need that spot there, and we need all that land in behind it. We're like, well, whoa, what are we going to do with SWM? Well, here's where site readiness really came into play. We talked to SWM. We said, look, this is what we need. It's a great opportunity for the people of Newberry County. It's a great opportunity for the state of South Carolina. Would you consider moving? And if you do, we have a place for you to move. Their biggest concern was, of course, their workforce. Everybody, once they have their workforce, they want to keep it. So at Mid-Carolina Commerce Park, that's where we had the spec building. So we were able to get and move them into the spec building. That's on that far end down there. That was the one piece that made the deal itself, because they had to have that property behind them, and they had to have where the SWM building was. So site readiness really played out, for us on that, and allowed us to land Samsung. And just to give you an idea of how much that has meant to us as a whole, there we go. You can't tell where SWM existed, because now you've got Samsung all the way back with the buildings connected, those type things. They expanded the original building. They built 3 other buildings, and they've actually connected buildings themselves into it. But all of that was able to happen because we had a building that we could negotiate with and work with SWM to move them into, to be able to get the rest of that property that was needed for Samsung to expand. I have a lot of stories about Samsung. I know time's getting close, but that is what site readiness really came into play, is we had that building we could put SWM in. Because if we did not have that, I think we would have lost them.
Good point. Good point.
We got a comment from Will Williams. Says, I'm definitely biased here, but everyone should be an advocate for EDOs and your communities, like my dad, Keith, Avery. Oh, wait, I think this is Kelsey. Not Will. Sorry, she's on Will's login.
Yeah.
In James's words, he's a bulldog for his communities and co-op. I never called your dad a bulldog, but yes, he is passionate about it.
Absolutely.
All right, Mark, Jamie.
I think we're pretty close to closing. So I mean, I think Mark. I mean, from my perspective, you know, and I think for our viewers and listeners, I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about, you know, what are some of the key trends that you think will impact economic development as we continue to move forward? Maybe relate that a little bit to COVID, but then also, how does, in your eyes, how does South Carolina stack up? Is there something we could be doing different? Or is there, you know, something we could be doing better?
Sure. You know, it's an interesting time, right? It's an interesting time in that 127-month expansion is over. I wasn't popular for this, and I'm not sure I should say it publicly, but I was advocating earlier in the year that I would love to have 2 quarters of down GDP and get this election over so next year we could get off and running. And I think COVID probably overdid it a little bit. We'll see. Yeah. But I think we're going to come out of this very strong, hopefully next year. And that doesn't lessen the fact that we've had so much demand beforehand that we need to continue to fill that site pipeline of ready product to go. I do think things are changing. That's what makes this business exciting. You know, it's kind of interesting over the last year in different parts of the country, not so much so in South Carolina, you know, economic development officials had taken in many places a lesser role. I mean, there were many communities in some states that just said, we're not recruiting anymore, much less, you know, evaluating sites. Incentive programs are being taken away. Why should we do this? We're at full employment, and our businesses don't want us to recruit anymore. And again, how much 60 days can make. So I think the economic development community in South Carolina and further away is really going to be critical in navigating this new path. Site readiness has a lot to do with it. My gosh, I think training and workforce it's going to be a new and different chapter. We're going to have, I think, a bunch of people that were employed in service jobs that may be ready to work. This may be a whole new workforce for us. How do we prepare for that? How do we position ourselves for reshoring? How do we, in a marketing sense, target these things in a proactive, well thought manner? So automation is going to continue. The trends that were there last year are going to continue. And you know what? Electric service and reliability is going to be increasingly critical. So I'm excited about what's about to happen. I'd like to see us get through kind of these bumps we're in, again, get this election done. But I think we've got a lot to look forward to. And I think you guys, you know, the power team and Keith, the co-ops and their leadership, and Bob and your board, I mean, I think you're doing the right thing. And I honestly, I'm telling you, I think you're doing it better than we see elsewhere, because each of these projects we do, and we haven't talked much about that, Jamie, about what we do on each project, but each one is different. And in each one, we're called in to kind of double check the due diligence that's been done on utilities and ingress and egress, et cetera. And it's to evaluate an expenditure and what does that mean? And is it the right thing to do? And is it the highest priority? So each of these projects is unique and different, and they're always backed up by some funding. And you know, we've made some recommendations not to do certain things. So I'll just close in saying we enjoy being on that team, and I would say a trusted partner. And I think you're on the right path. The path is going to change. We got to keep, if you stay the same, you're not going to make it. And you're not. You're evolving, and we all are. So thanks for James and Jamie and Keith for letting me join you today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you to the three of you for taking time to do this. They didn't just get on camera today. They spent a lot of time the last 2 weeks putting this whole thing together. So thank all of you. To our attendees and our partners, man, thank you guys for being with us. We've had great feedback on last week's session. Thank you for the comments and feedback on today's session. This will be uploaded later today. We have a YouTube channel that we've started. And so this will be uploaded later today, and feel free to share it with your colleagues. And I just want to reiterate that if, especially for our communities, if there's a role that we can play in helping you advocate for site acquisition, site development, if there's a role that we can play in educating your elected officials, or connecting you to somebody else who can, please don't hesitate to reach out. Caroline Warner, that's going to be a primary role that she will play for us, is helping connect the dots. And also on the workforce side, just picking up on where Mark left off, we are right now in the midst of developing a strategy for the role that cooperatives can play as a partner in your community to drive better opportunities to the people that we serve and that you serve, and also looking at the talent pipeline and what role we all play in that. So stay tuned. We'll be, in the days and weeks ahead, we'll be announcing more of a strategy around that as well. So with that, gentlemen, thank you. To our guests, thank you for being here. That's it for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Dee Dee Caldwell.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great day.
Take care.